Mahalo, Mark, and aloha, everyone, at the 2020 Statewide Homeless Awareness Virtual Conference. I'd like to thank everyone for participating today, once again, in a very unusual format that is quickly becoming the new normal. I'd like to thank everyone for their adaptability and being willing to change and adapt to a changing climate that we have here. As you know, we're all affected by this. We're all affected by COVID-19, and it affects our daily lives, and none more so than our homeless. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. I'd like to thank everyone for their dedication to the cause and for being willing to adapt to this changing climate to address issues that are of incredible importance to everyone, especially us here in Honolulu and in Hawaii. Most of you are attendees, so by default, you can only see and hear. You are muted by default. However, as a reminder to our panelists, please be sure to mute when you are not speaking. That being said, we'd like to encourage everyone to participate in today's event by participating in the Q&A down in the bottom right of your WebEx window. Time permitting, we would love to hear and answer all of your questions. Now, this is the opening plenary session, which should be ending at 10 o'clock exactly. That gives us an hour, which sounds like a long time, but is going to be surprisingly short. So we're going to ask our panelists to try to keep it as brief as possible, but we also want to make sure that we're as thorough as possible. So we'd like to answer your questions. Please participate in the Q&A. If we have time, we'd love to hear from all of you. If you get disconnected, you can easily get reconnected by going to the conference webpage at honolulu.gov/housing and then just click on the first link if you don't have it saved already. The 2020 Statewide Homeless Awareness Virtual Conference is the title of the link, and you should see it right there on the page. Now, if you are, I'd like to let you know that there's also a link to the to download the conference evaluation and CEU application form. All of that is available on the conference webpage, which is easily accessible at honolulu.gov/housing. This opening plenary again ends at 10 a.m. and afterwards, please go to your respective breakout sessions. But for now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for our aloha and welcome message, the Governor of the State of Hawaii, Governor David Ige. Now, Governor Ige is focused on improving the lives of Hawaii's people and making the island a place future generations choose to call home. He is increasing affordable housing, reducing homelessness, moving towards the state's 100% renewable energy goal, and remodeling public education to prepare students for the innovation economy of the 21st century. Under his leadership, the state has aggressively moved to ensure financial sustainability and enable future growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please devote your attention to Governor David Ige.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate the introduction. I'm really proud of everyone's efforts all across the state to make homelessness and solving homelessness a priority. I'm also proud of so many people are stepping up and taking on leadership roles in addressing homelessness. Despite a COVID-19 pandemic, our community is resilient and is still filled with much aloha. Despite the challenges we all have, we are still looking out for one another, taking care of one another, especially those who are homeless. As COVID remains, we continue to do what it takes to stay safe. The 3 W's, wash our hands, wear our mask, and watch our distance. The fact that this virtual conference is happening is a testament to the resilience of our community to take on this issue together. While we cannot meet in person, over 900 individuals have registered to participate. We have speakers not only from the local organizations, but from national groups like the National Alliance to End Homelessness, org.co, and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. Another sign of our community's resilience is that our providers continued to place individuals into permanent housing even during this pandemic. Statewide, nearly 3,400 individuals have been placed into permanent housing between March and September, the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. In September, over 3/4 or 76% of individuals leaving homeless programs on the neighbor islands went into permanent housing. Outreach and shelter providers are on the front lines of the pandemic and do not have the option to work from home. For those on the front lines, I truly appreciate your efforts and commend you for your dedication, compassion, and commitment to the most vulnerable in our community. And because of you, we are maintaining our commitment to end homelessness by focusing on permanent housing as our end goal. And not only are we maintaining our focus on housing, but our homeless system is continuing to innovate and come up with new solutions to meet the needs throughout the state. On Oahu, the Honolulu Police Department launched the POST program at Ke'ehi Lagoon, which has placed over 337 individuals into shelter, housing, or treatment since April. On Kauai, the county and providers have outreached together to those in the beach parks and signed up hundreds for the tenant-based rental assistance program and other housing options. On Maui, new pallet shelters have been set up for vulnerable homeless individuals, and the Maui dorms will open soon as additional permanent housing in early 2021. The Department of Health partnered with the counties to set up isolation and quarantine sites statewide and launched mobile testing to homeless shelters and encampments. Hawaii Public Housing Authority partnered with HIEMA to launch a feeding program and also opened its wait list to launch a new program for at-risk individuals leasing in place. This conference provides an opportunity to hear from local and national partners, including our first responders in outreach and shelter, philanthropic partners, and others to form new connections and to identify new opportunities to come together. Later this morning, we'll also hear from the Foundations for Social Change about their new LEAF project and how their pilot efforts have seen tremendous positive impact in the lives of homeless individuals. Tomorrow, Nan Roman from the National Alliance to End Homelessness will share what the impact of the election at the national level will have and what we can anticipate from Congress and the federal government moving forward. We know that the next year will bring challenges, but also opportunities. Our community has seen increases in homelessness before, and we have come together as a community to address it. Following the 2009 economic recession, we saw a steady increase in our homeless population that resulted in nearly 8,000 people experiencing homelessness statewide in 2016. However, by coming together and with a common focus on housing, we were able to reduce that number by 18% over the past 4 years. Similarly, we will come together to face the challenges as a community and will not lose our focus on housing as the ultimate solution to ending homelessness for those who are experiencing it. Thank you to all for joining us today for this conference, and thank you for the many dedicated volunteers working behind the scenes to organize host the workshops, coordinate logistics, and organize this virtual meeting. All of you are clear examples of our community's resilience and how Hawaii can come together to lift each other up, even through the toughest of times. I hope you all have a wonderful conference and that your experiences are educational and fulfilling. Most importantly, hope you can find your part in us coming together to end homelessness. Aloha and mahalo.
Mahalo, Governor David Ige, and thank you so much for those stirring words and for powering through some technical difficulties at the beginning. It is very good to hear from you. Thank you so much for everything that you do for the state, and for the city, and for our homeless people. Now I'd like to move on to our next section of our opening plenary to make sure that we have enough time to hear from everyone. We are very honored to have with us today Claire Elizabeth Williams and Dr. Jiaying Zhao to talk about our New Leaf project, Direct Giving to Homeless People. Now, if I could briefly introduce these speakers, Claire is the co-founder and CEO of Foundations for Social Change, an organization that works with people living on the margins to develop measurable solutions that are scientifically based and informed by lived experience. Founded in 2015, then environmental consultant Claire Elizabeth Williams was compelled to pursue work that would make a real difference in her community. And Dr. Jiaying Zhao is the Canada Research Chair and Associate Professor in the Department of Psychology and the Institute for Resources, Environment, and Sustainability at the University of British Columbia. Dr. Zhao uses psychological principles to design behavioral solutions to address financial and environmental sustainability challenges. Dr. Zhao and Ms. Williams, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Adam. And hello to everyone out there. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today to be talking about a very important issue that we're seeing, as Governor Ige said, growing numbers of people experiencing homelessness in our communities. So we are excited to share the results from our bold and innovative pilot project. So Ryan, if you could pull up our deck, that would be great. So I am the CEO and co-founder of our organization, and really my co-founder and I were struck by the number of increasing people experiencing homelessness in our community, and we reflected on current approaches, which really haven't changed much over the last 50 plus years, despite a radically different landscape that we live in now and radically different times. And so we thought it was time for some innovation in this space, and really that's what led to the creation of this project. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Ryan. So as Adam said, we are a charitable organization based here in Vancouver, BC, and he spoke about our vision and mission, but ultimately we are here to drive meaningful risk-taking to advance social change. And all of our work is predicated on 3 core values. So courage to take meaningful risk, the compassion to approach the people that we're helping with dignity, to see their humanity behind the circumstances, and we're about making an impact in our community. Next slide, please. So the New Leaf project involves 3 primary components. The first is a workshop. So this is based on the work of Jiaying, and it involves self-affirmation exercises, plans, and goal setting. The second component is coaching. So we worked with a team of 50 volunteer coaches who worked for a period of 6 months one-on-one with some of our project participants. And then the final piece is the most interesting for most people, which is that financial support. So we gave out a one-time cash transfer of 7,500 Canadian dollars. That's the equivalent of 5,700 US dollars. And so this amount was based upon 1 year of income assistance here in the province of British Columbia. Next slide. So those 3 components were arranged into 4 different intervention groups. So we have group 1 and group 2, which are the cash groups, and then group 3 and group 4, which is the non-cash group. So group 1 is really kind of the gold standard, where our participants receive $7,500 cash, a workshop, and coaching. Group number 2 was cash and workshop but no coaching. And then group 3 and group 4 are the non-cash groups. So group 3 received coaching in the workshop, and then our truest control group would be group 4. And in addition to these primary supports, our participants also received additional resources. So this was designed as a randomized control study. So every time we met with them to collect data, we offered them an honorarium of about 20 to 30 Canadian dollars. We provided everybody with a resource booklet, which was listed all of the low barrier services across the Lower Mainland here in British Columbia. Where needed, we replaced people's identification for free. This is a huge barrier for folks. As is connectivity, so people who did not have access to a smartphone, we equipped them with a used smartphone. And then we also provided everyone in our study with a free checking account at Van City, which is our local credit union. And that was to avoid saddling people with high banking fees, as well as having them use things like money marts, which are quite predatory in terms of lending practices. Next slide, please. So in terms of our target population, we recruited from 22 homeless shelters around Metro Vancouver, and we screened people for eligibility. And we did this because we wanted to ensure the highest likelihood of success And we also, no one's ever worked with direct cash transfers with this population before, so we wanted to start small. And then as we learned things, as we moved through our pilot project, then start expanding our parameters as we move forward and launch other projects. So that criteria involved people being between age of 19 to 65, less than 2 years homeless, Canadian resident or permanent citizen. And then we looked at the degree of functionality. So there we were looking at people's alcohol use, substance use, and mental health. So people could have variations on a scale. They just needed to be under a certain threshold in order to be screened into our project. Next slide. In terms of our demographic, we had 115 people who were successfully enrolled in the study. The average age was quite young, so 42 years of age, 40% women, 34% had children under the age of 19. Many people had actually a number of children. We had 12% Indigenous people in our group, which was actually quite low compared to the general homeless population, which sits at about 36%. Average length of time homeless was 6 months. That represents about half the homeless population here in Vancouver. And 28% of our participants were employed in some form. Next slide. I think it's over to you, Jiaying.
Thank you, Claire. Aloha there, everyone. So I will talk about our impact. Next slide. So just a refresher, I will be looking at the combined groups of 1 and 2. So I'll call this cash group. I'll compare the results to 3 and 4 combined. I can talk more into the details between 1, 2, and 3, 4, but for the sake of time, I'll just use cash group as a comparison to non-cash groups. So next slide. Okay, so we see positive impacts in 5 domains: housing stability, money management, spending, food security, and executive function. That's a critical part of the cognitive function. We don't see a huge impact on the following domains, such as life satisfaction, employment, or health. So next slide. So jumping into housing stability. So this graph is quite busy, but the take-home message here is that at 1 month after the cash transfer, a lot more participants moved into stable housing compared to non-cash participants. And actually, 75% of our cash recipients moved into stable housing by 12 months. So what this shows is that with the cash transfer, participants were able to move into stable housing faster. Next slide. This is days of homelessness, so days being on the street or in a shelter. So we track people over 1 year. So the cash group, the cash participants were able to move into stable housing quickly at 1 month. And in total, the cash group spent more than 4,000 days, fewer days being homeless than the control group. So that impact is enormous. Next slide. So this is looking at money management and specifically on savings. So what we found was cash recipients retained over $1,000 more in savings over 1 year than control participants. So this is really encouraging because it says that people actually did not spend money at once. They actually managed to save money over time, more money over time than participants. Okay, next slide. This is their spending. So we tracked how people spend the money over 1 year. So we found that the cash recipients spend more money over 1 year than control participants. So this is not surprising. They're actually spending the cash transfers. So next slide. They spend more money on rent. So this is correlated with the stable housing results. So as they were able to move into stable housing, cash recipients spend more money on rent. Next slide. They also spend more money on clothing, but only at 1 month. So this suggests that they were able to replenish their wardrobe and get a fresh set of new clothes at 1 month after the cash transfer. Next slide. This is spending on clothes for their kids, and this is a phenomenal result, showing that the cash transfer benefit not just the recipients themselves, but also their family members, specifically their children. Next slide. This is spending on food. We see not only an increase in spending on food for the recipients themselves, but also on their children, meaning that they are able to feed themselves and their family after the cash transfer. So next slide. This is the specific spending breakdown between the cash group and the non-cash group. So as you can see here, about a quarter of the money goes to rent, another quarter goes to food, and then the rest of the gray bars goes to bills, so like utility bills, other types of bills. Then people spend money on transit, so like bus, the public transit systems, clothes, and food. An important category is alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes. So you can see that that's only a fraction of the spending, monthly spending for both groups. And importantly, next slide, we actually see a 39% reduction in spending on sanitation goods, so goods like alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes in the cash group. So this is really important to take away because it shows that the cash transfer actually led to a reduction on spending on alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes. This is counter to a lot of the assumptions we hold about people living in homelessness. Next slide. And as a result of more spending on food, a greater number of cash participants achieve food security over time compared to non-cash participants. So next slide. This is executive control. So this is a cognitive function. This is your ability to, in overriding your impulses, to withhold your impulsive behaviors. So this here we see a significant increase in executive control. So that's promising. That's just that cash transfers benefit not only materialistic outcomes, but also psychological outcomes as well. Next slide. Okay, so we also performed a cost-benefit analysis. We want to see whether this cash transfer generated cash savings for the government. So next slide. So we looked at how much people used social services over 1 year between the two groups. And what we found was something remarkable, that each cash recipient was able to save the government over $11,000 over 1 year compared to non-cash participants. And this reduction in cost services is because of the reduced reliance on the shelter system in Vancouver. So $11,000 is definitely more than $7,500 off the cash transfer. So what this analysis showed was the cash transfer is actually a cost-effective approach, generating net savings for the government compared to the business as usual approach. Next slide. Okay, so over to you, Claire.
Thanks, Jiaying. So we had a number of stories of hope and triumph from our project participants, and I wish I had time to share them all with you. But instead of me sharing that story, actually, I'd love to show you a short video clip of one of our project participants on the next slide. This is Ray, and he is a perfect example of how this intervention can be so transformative for somebody who is simply just lacking the financial resources to move their life forward. Over to you, Ryan, to press play.
Where one day everything was great, right? The next week everything was gone, right? Like my job, my house, my everything, my money, it was gone. The balance that New Leaf has given me basically gave me that stepping stone, right? Because I mean, I was homeless. I had no real income, and when I did make the income, it was to survive. Well, my goals is to better myself into the more frontline work with the addiction and the alcoholism and the abuse, and I kind of want to give back where I've came from. I just got computer training, start Monday, so I'm advancing myself. You know, I might one day be that important person that has a powerful voice. I'm just right now, like I said, a seed can grow into an oak tree, right? And hopefully one day I can be there.
know, Ray's story is remarkable, and he inspires me in terms of what he's been able to achieve, and similar to many other project participants who have just used this cash to move their lives forward in ways that wouldn't have been possible without it. And so that has inspired us to continue advancing this work. So, you know, the key takeaways for us is, as you may know, Vancouver is the most expensive city in Canada. We have a very large number of people who are experiencing homelessness. We have very high rents, very low vacancy. But even with that, those kind of constraints, we're still seeing that this relatively small sum of cash is making a difference in people's lives. It's resulting in an increase in housing stability. People are managing their money well, that they're spending it on things to move their lives forward, increasing food security and executive function. And, you know, that 39% is really, to me, it's the darling of our data set, because what it does is it challenges everything we think about homelessness, everything we think about poverty. Even as service providers and people who are trying to do good in the world, we have biases, we have prejudices, and this work, I think, really calls that into question in terms of how we think about the people that we're trying to help. Do we see them as powerless, or do we see them as naturally resourceful and creative and whole, and people who know what they need to move their lives forward? And I also think this work demonstrates the value of meaningful risk-taking to advance social change. You know, it's time for new approaches that are more dignified and more powerful to help solve poverty here in North America, if not across the world. Next slide. So what that means for us is that we are now creating an expansion project. Next slide. So we will be launching our expansion project in 2021. We're currently in fundraising mode, so it's all dependent on raising the funds. But we'll see a simplified design. We will be giving out 8,500 Canadian dollars. And then once we have wrapped up that project, our objective is to scale across the country, if not North America. We've had a number of inquiries from around the world since going public with our results, and I just think that speaks to the need for innovation in this space, and also people's desire to amplify the impact in lives of people who are experiencing poverty. So I think at this point, the next slide is just our sign off to thank you for your attention. I know we didn't have a lot of time today, but I would like to invite you all to a town hall that Jiaying and I are hosting tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can email me at claire@forsocialchange.org, and I'll connect you with our coordinator. And this will include a number of nonprofit organizations from around North America who want to know more about our work, and where we'll have time and space for more one-on-one questions. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share our work. Mahalo.